Right, ready to dive in. We're going deep today into Edward and Bella, that Twilight Saga love story everyone's always talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, so many debates about it, right? Like,
Yeah,
is it the real deal or just, all sparkly vampire fantasy? And we've got a ton to work with here.
we do.
Film analyses, key excerpts from the books, even stuff from Midnight Sun so we can see, like, Edward's point of view.
Which I think is going to be super interesting, getting inside his head a little bit.
Totally. It's like, can his actions actually live up to all those intense stares?
Right, exactly. And not just skimming the surface. We're gonna really try and get into his motivations.
Yeah, peel back those layers.
For sure.
I think we should start with those movie moments, the ones that, like, had everyone grabbing their popcorn.
Okay, yeah.
That scene in Twilight, Edward stopping the van with his hand.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about dramatic.
That's not just a dent for show, though. You know what I mean? It's like this visual metaphor the director's using.
Oh, interesting.
Showing us right away, like, how far Edward's willing to go.
Yeah.
The force he'll use to protect Bella.
It's like, okay, everybody, this vampire is serious.
Exactly.
But then, just a few scenes later, we're in biology class, and Edward's fighting a whole different battle.
Totally different, yeah.
That reaction to Bella's scent, it's almost hard to watch.
Think about it, though, from Edward's side, right?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Surrounded by this thing that could totally break his control, his vampire instincts.
Right.
Those clenched fists, that struggle to breathe, it's all restraint.
Wow.
He's choosing Bella over his own nature.
That's got to be rough.
Yeah, agonizing.
Makes you wonder if that kind of love can even, last.
Yeah.
But even with all that going on inside him,
Yes.
Edward still decides to reveal himself to Bella, in the forest. He's not just showing her sparkly skin, he's showing his, like, vulnerable side.
This is where the vampire lore gets really cool, I think.
Okay, tell me.
Sunlight, it's supposed to be their weakness, right? But for Edward, it's this chance to be truly seen by Bella.
It's like he's turning his weakness into a strength.
He's risking everything, not just being exposed, but being rejected.
That's vulnerability for sure. And then, of course, we have New Moon when he leaves.
Oh, man.
The way he looks at her, those lines he says.
Heartbreaking every time.
Even knowing how it ends, it's tough.
Always makes me think about sacrifice and love,
Oh, interesting.
Like, is Edward being truly selfless?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it this twisted kind of protection, even manipulation?
Hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a question that hangs over the whole saga.
So we've seen Edward in action, but what about the book moments that show us what he's thinking?
Right.
Like when he admits to watching Bella sleep. Kind of creepy, but also kind of sweet.
Remember, they're not even dating then, right?
Oh, true.
Edward's already fascinated by her.
Uh-huh.
Drawn to her innocence, that peacefulness she has even when she's sleeping.
Shows how deep his feelings were from the start. It's like he's trying to figure her out.
Yeah, solve the puzzle.
Then he throws us this curveball with that confession about her blood.
Oh, yeah.
He says, I wanted to kill you. I've never wanted a human's blood so much.
An intense.
Mixed signals much.
But that line gets to the core of his struggle.
Okay, how so?
Edward loves Bella, but he's always aware of the danger.
Right.
He's a vampire.
Yeah.
It's not just romantic gestures. It's this constant fight against his nature.
For her.
Yes.
Then, in Breaking Dawn, he offers to let Bella have a child with Jacob.
Whoa, yeah.
How many guys would do that?
Major turning point.
It is.
Edward puts aside everything. Pride, possessiveness, because he's scared losing Bella during the pregnancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's putting her happiness, her survival, above his own wants.
It's like, your life means more to me than anything, even letting go.
And then when Bella's life's on the line during childbirth,
Oh, yeah.
Edward's desperation, him willing to turn her into a vampire himself,
It's all out there.
he's not just being heroic, he's fighting for the woman he can't live without.
And then Midnight Sun takes that desperation and, like, cranks it up.
Oh, absolutely.
We're in his head now, full force.
You get the full picture.
That attraction to Bella, the constant battle against his thirst.
And the self-loathing, so much self-loathing.
I remember reading that book and just being overwhelmed.
It's a lot.
He calls her scent the most delicious smell in the world.
Wow.
But it's clear, right, that this attraction is both, like, good and bad for him.
A blessing and a curse, definitely.
And the way he wants to protect her goes beyond the obvious dangers, too.
Oh, yeah.
Worried about everything, always on guard, even when she's just living her life.
Shows how much he cares, but it also makes you think about, like, healthy boundaries in a relationship.
Yeah, true. Okay, we've been, like, really focused on Edward,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't forget about Bella in all of this, right?
Right.
Her life totally changes when Edward shows up.
Oh, yeah.
It's like she gets swept up in this whole vampire world,
Mm.
and it's nonstop drama.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because Bella doesn't just, like, let it all happen to her, you know?
What do you mean?
She chooses this life with Edward, knowing the risks, knowing what she's giving up.
That's a good point.
It's a level of agency that I think people sometimes miss.
She's not just, like, waiting around to be rescued.
Exactly.
Bella's stubborn, right?
Oh, for sure.
Determined to be with Edward, and she'll fight for it.
She doesn't fit that whole damsel in distress thing. Not at all.
Think about it. She chooses to become a vampire.
Huge decision.
Giving up everything.
Everything. Just to be with him.
Forever?
It makes you think about immortality, you know?
In what way?
Is it really all it's cracked up to be?
I mean, we always focus on, like, living forever.
Right.
But Bella's transformation, it shows the cost.
Big time.
Family, friends, being human, it's all gone.
Yeah, even in a fantasy world, there are consequences.
Makes you wonder, if you were Bella, could you make that choice?
That's a big question.
It is.
What are we willing to sacrifice for love?
Our dreams, our connections.
Even parts of ourselves.
That's going way beyond Twilight now.
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal thing.
Okay, we got to talk about the elephant in the room.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The power imbalance.
Between Edward and Bella.
Mm-hmm. He's like a 100-year-old vampire, superpowers and all that.
Right.
She's a teenage girl.
Yeah, that's a pretty big gap.
Definitely raises some red flags.
It sparked a lot of debate, for sure.
For good reason.
Edward's always watching over Bella, influencing her, protecting her.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he means well, it can feel controlling.
Like there's a line between being protective and being possessive, right?
Definitely.
And Edward kind of blurs that line sometimes.
But they also live in this world where danger is everywhere, especially from other vampires.
That's true. He knows how vulnerable she is.
Exactly, and he's terrified of losing her.
So it's this balancing act, his love for Bella and the dangers of being a vampire.
A tough spot to be in.
No easy answers.
Not at all.
But Bella doesn't just take it, you know.
Oh no, she pushes back.
Questions his decisions, makes her own choices.
Even when they go against what Edward wants.
Like she's saying, hey, I'm part of this too, my voice matters.
It's a reminder that she's not just a fragile thing.
Right. She's strong, makes up her own mind.
It's key to their dynamic.
Yeah, she challenges him.
Reminds us that she's not some, doll.
Right, she's a woman who can make her own decisions.
Their relationship, it's definitely not a fairy tale.
No, not at all.
Messy, complicated, full of contradictions.
But that's also what makes it, like, so interesting to think about.
Totally.
It makes you think about love, power, the compromises we made.
Stuff that goes way beyond just Twilight,
You said earlier that Twilight was this global phenomenon.
Yeah, huge.
Why do you think this love story, which isn't exactly traditional, resonated with so many people?
It's a good question.
It is.
I think it taps into our fascination with forbidden love.
Okay, yeah.
Those passionate, intense relationships that break the rules.
Like Romeo and Juliet, but with vampires.
Exactly. There's something alluring about a love that's all-consuming, secretive.
And dangerous.
Right, and let's not forget the fantasy element.
Oh, yeah, Edward is like the perfect love ideal.
Always devoted, incredibly attractive, always there to protect you.
It's hard to resist that.
Very hard.
He's like the ultimate bad boy, but with a heart of gold and superpowers.
And Bella gets to be with this extraordinary being.
Makes her the envy of, like, everyone.
It speaks to that deep desire we all have to be loved, accepted, chosen.
Especially by someone who seems larger than life.
Right, but it also makes you wonder about our expectations in real relationships.
If Edward is the fantasy.
Yeah, what does that say about the pressure we put on ourselves and our partners?
To live up to this ideal that might not even be possible.
It challenges us to look at the messages we get from pop culture.
And how those messages shape our views on love and romance.
Exactly. Are we looking for real connection?
Or are we chasing a fantasy?
Maybe that's one of the most valuable things about Edward and Bella.
What do you mean?
It makes us think about our own relationship values, our expectations,
Yeah.
and the fact that love, real love, is complicated.
So we've covered a lot. Edward's actions, his sacrifices, Bella's experience.
The power dynamics, the cultural impact.
But there's one more piece we need to look at.
Okay, what's that?
Choice, the role of choice in all this. Choice, yeah, we've talked about Edward's, like, intense love and how it affects Bella.
And how their story kind of reflects our own, fascination with all that passionate romance stuff.
But what about choice in all this?
That's where we, really get to the core of their relationship.
Okay, how so?
Edward's love is, undeniable.
Yeah, definitely.
But Bella's agency in choosing him, choosing that whole vampire life, that's crucial.
Right. It's easy to get swept up in the romance.
Oh, yeah.
But Bella makes some big decisions.
Big ones.
What stands out to you the most?
Her choice to be with Edward, even though she knows the risks.
Mm-hmm.
Her choice to become a vampire, giving up her human life.
It's a lot to give up.
To be with him forever?
She doesn't make those choices lightly.
No, not at all.
She chooses Edward, and then she chooses the consequences that come with that.
Even the really hard ones.
And those consequences, there's good and bad,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
She gets the strength, the speed, all that vampire stuff.
But she loses her family, her friends.
Her whole human life.
What?
Makes you wonder, if you were Bella, could you actually do that?
That's where the romanticization of vampires comes in, you know?
Oh, interesting. How so?
Immortality sounds great, but it has a huge price.
Mm-hmm.
Bella's transformation shows that, what we might have to sacrifice.
It's a question for all of us, not just in Twilight.
Exactly.
What are we willing to give up for the people we love?
Careers, dreams.
Ourselves, even.
Yeah, and how much choice do we really have in those moments?
That's a good point.
Is it always freely given? Or are there pressures, expectations, things that influence us?
It's easy to see Bella's choice as this, like, romantic gesture.
But it's so much more complicated than that.
This is getting deep.
It is, but that's what makes Edward and Bella so fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just romance, it's about human nature, our choices.
And what happens because of those choices?
It makes us think about our own lives.
Exactly.
By looking at them, we get insights into our own beliefs about love, sacrifice.
The choices we make.
It challenges us to think about the stories we tell ourselves about romance.
And what we're willing to give up.
It's not about judging Bella, it's about understanding her.
Mm-hmm. So what's the biggest takeaway for you from all of this, from our deep dive into Edward and Bella?
I think it's this. Love, even the most intense kind, requires choice.
Okay.
Agency,
Yeah.
a willingness to see both the good and the bad that comes with it.
There's no easy answer.
No fairy tale ending that just wraps everything up perfectly.
It's messy.
It's about figuring things out, navigating the tough stuff,
And choosing to love.
even when it's hard.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And it leaves us with, like, a lot to think about.
It's-
If Edward's the fantasy, then Bella reminds us that even in fantasy, choices matter.
They do.
Love, in all its forms, it shapes us.
So think about Edward and Bella, and then think about this.
Okay.
What choices have you made for love?
That's a good one.
And what are you willing to choose going forward?
Wow, that's a powerful question to end on.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring those depths of your own heart